Chapter 6, The One I Couldn't Save, September 29th, 2023. We met during my freshman year at Appalachian State University, a liberal arts school in the North Carolina mountains. It was infamous for being one of the top drug schools in the country. That's not why I went. Originally, I was supposed to go with my friend Nick Pyre, who I was in a band with for a time called In Carry On. Get it, In Carrion? But anyway, he ended up at Berklee College of Music. I'd also considered a small school called Centenary and a program at Disney World that combined work and college. But fear held me back, and App State felt like a safe choice. Dana and I met in the hallway outside my dorm room, 252 East Hall, which had been voted one of the best drug dorms by High Times a few years earlier. I was wearing an Insane Clown Posse shirt. Dana, rail thin and taller than most girls, looked at me and said, "ICP, fuck yeah." I looked at her and knew instantly I loved her. She was blonde, of course, though her hair was cropped short. What captivated me, though, was the kindness in her eyes and the warmth of her smile. We talked in the hallway for what felt like both an eternity and an instant. I wanted to be with her in every way. Then she mentioned her boyfriend. My heart sank, but I prayed I'd see her again. It wasn't just that she recognized the obscure juvenile band plastered across my shirt. It was the way she genuinely listened to what I had to say. Dana's mix of similarities and stark differences intrigued me. She was beautiful, kind, and actually paying attention to me, and I wasn't making a fool of myself. Of course, it was too good to be true. There was always a boyfriend, or they just didn't like me back. Later that night, I was jolted awake by rapid knocking at my door. When I opened it, there was Dana, standing in the dim light, her chin trembling and tears streaming down her face. "What the fuck?" I asked, ever the poet. "Josh slapped me," she said, her voice cracking. "What?" He called me a slut and a bitch, and then he slapped me. I didn't even think. I left her in my doorway and headed straight to the dorm room she had pointed out earlier. Josh was tall and lanky, with a rat-like face, long greasy hair, and a fedora that only made him look sleazier. I disliked him the moment I saw him slinking around the dorms, bumming cigs and weed off anyone who would indulge him. When I arrived, his back was turned, and he was swaying awkwardly to some bad reggae music, acting as if nothing had happened. "Hey, motherfucker," I said. He turned, and before he could even react, my hand shot out and wrapped around his throat. Without fully realizing what I was doing, I lifted him off the ground, or at least pushed him against the wall and up it. In my memory, it felt like a full-on Schwarzenegger move, but it was probably less dramatic. For the first time in my life, I felt like a badass. Righteous anger coursed through me. "If you ever touch her again," I growled, "I will fucking kill you, got it?" He nodded shakily, his eyes wide with fear. I released him, let him slide down the wall, and walked out without another word. When I returned to my dorm room, Dana was still sitting on my bed. Her eyes were red and puffy, with streaks of mascara trailing down her cheeks. She looked up at me, and without hesitation, I sat down beside her. We talked for hours. She told me she was adopted like me. She shared stories about high school, her brother, her dad, and, hesitantly, about her boyfriends. That's when she told me she had been raped by her boyfriend the year before. From that moment on, I was dedicated to showing her that not all guys were like him. I wanted her to know she could trust me, rely on me, but I was scared, terrified of getting too close. I didn't like being touched, even though I desperately wanted to hold her. That fear of intimacy, combined with my deep desire to protect her, became the foundation of our strange and complicated connection. That hesitation conveniently aligned with my more cowardly side. Let's not sugarcoat it. I've always been a coward when it comes to women. Maybe it's the adoption thing. Maybe it's the repeated feelings of abandonment. Maybe it's just bad luck. But by this point in my life, I was utterly terrified of women. Still am, in a lot of ways. So, not making a move on Dana felt like the safest choice, even if it was also the most frustrating. For 2 glorious weeks, we spent almost every moment together, getting to know each other better. There was a sleazy guy, Brian Crossan, who kept hovering around, trying to insert himself into our time together. But I was so focused on Dana that I barely gave him a second thought. I should have. After what felt like the perfect first official date, I found out she had been sleeping with both Brian and my friend Danny. Stupid, betrayed, rejected. Those were the words running through my mind. I felt so small, so insignificant. It was like the air had been sucked out of my chest, and all I could feel was the ache of hurt and humiliation. To cope, I did what I knew best. I threw myself deeper into the haze of partying, drinking, drugs, whatever could drown out the pain and distract me from the spiral of shame and heartbreak. I don't remember how I handled it in those immediate days, probably because I didn't. What I do know is that I was devastated. I still loved Dana and wanted things to work, but despite the lingering connection, we never truly recovered from that moment. Our on-again, off-again dynamic continued, but it was never the same. Eventually, the weight of everything became too much. One night, my self-destructive path led me to the creek that ran through the Appalachian State campus. I stood there holding a massive rock in my hands, the cold water rushing around my feet. The plan was simple. Lie down in the creek, place the rock on my chest, and let it all end. It wasn't the first time I had felt this way. Suicidal thoughts had been familiar companions since I was a kid, maybe 8 or 9 years old. I can still remember lying in bed in my underoos, wondering if life was supposed to feel so heavy, thinking even then that death might be a better alternative. But this time was different. This time I wasn't just thinking about it. I was taking deliberate action to end my life. I stopped and had a moment of clarity. Not only was my idea for self-destruction stupid, but it was also likely ineffective. Like every other suicidal thought I'd ever had, it ended with me doubting my ability to pull it off. Knowing my luck, someone would find me and save me, leaving me trapped in a broken body, a human vegetable strapped to a bed like the soldier in Metallica's one video. So, I put the rock down. Instead of the creek, I walked to health services and told them everything. They tested me for mental stability, and the results made it clear I was in crisis. Luckily, it was still early enough in my second semester for me to withdraw from classes without failing. I left Appalachian State, went home, and got a job at Frodo's Pizza, a local joint. The night I left App State was the only time Dana and I ever crossed into physical intimacy. She showed up at my dorm room crying. My roommate was out again with his girlfriend, and she told me everyone was blaming her for my leaving. I was stunned. Of course I was leaving because of her. But I didn't want to be cruel, so I explained that my struggles weren't new. I'd been suicidal for years, and leaving was my way of seeking help to stop feeling so sad and scared all the time. When I got home, I started therapy. It wasn't especially helpful, though, because I wasn't a good patient. My therapist asked all the right questions, but I was too self-critical and afraid to open up. I dodged and deflected, avoiding the real issues. Oddly enough, the most helpful takeaway from that time came not from therapy, but from an article in GQ I read in the waiting room. In it, Chris Christopherson, actor, musician, and all-around legend, talked about the benefits of marijuana. Up until that point, I'd carried a lot of guilt about my drug use. The article reframed things for me. Maybe I could smoke weed and still be a functional, even successful person. It was a foreign concept. At the time, marijuana was still stigmatized, a thing for fiends and freaks. But I'd been smoking it for years, ever since my friend Taylor Waldrop and I bonded over the shared burden of being broken kids. Taylor had his own heavy history. His mom took in his dad, who was dying of AIDS from unprotected sex with men while married to her. That scandal marked Taylor as a target in our conservative community. People whispered about his family and hurled insults his way, questioning his sexuality just because of his dad's past. For both of us, weed was a few hours of peace in a life filled with too many bad days. After my rocky semester away, I returned to App determined to focus on academics and self-improvement. But I was also scared of people, of rejection, of life itself. I avoided big parties and social scenes. I moved in with a friend, and as we unloaded my Trailblazer at our new apartment, a rundown brick box of a complex with an open-air walkway, I heard a familiar voice below me. Leaning over the railing, I saw a blonde bob. Dana, moving into the apartment directly below me. I leaned back and muttered a string of curses under my breath. I tried to steel myself, stuffing down the swirl of emotions threatening to rise. Then I started to call out to her until a short, raver-looking guy appeared, walked up to her, and kissed her on the cheek. I froze, watching from above, and then leaned back against the railing, closing my eyes. Of course, this is my life. In therapy, I decided some of the things Dana had put me through were messed up. The push and pull of our dynamic, my desperate need for her, her choices that hurt me, it was all too much. But her greatest crime, I realized, wasn't her actions. It was that she didn't love me back. Deep down, I knew she did, though. She had to. I'd met her parents, and we'd exchanged countless letters. In writing, she was tender, loving in a way she rarely showed me in person. I clung to that. Later, when I finally worked up the nerve to speak to her, she was gone from the porch. The door to her apartment was shut, and I was left standing alone, once again with my thoughts. And then, comma, dash, goddamn cat. Chapter 7, Still Pretending. October 1st, 2023. I had Mohs surgery on my arm today. It sucked. For those who don't know, Mohs surgery is this painstakingly precise procedure where they remove layers of skin one at a time, checking each under a microscope for cancer cells before deciding whether to take another layer. It's supposed to preserve as much healthy tissue as possible while still getting rid of the cancer. Sounds great in theory, right? In practice, though, it's a test of patience and endurance. The doctor numbed my arm where they'd previously done the biopsy and started by drawing lines around it to remove the first layer of skin, aiming to get rid of the melanoma. Right away, I could tell the lines were too small. I knew it in my gut. But as usual, I kept my mouth shut, convincing myself they knew what they were doing. When the results from the first cut came back showing cancer was still there, I was annoyed, mostly at myself for not speaking up. 3 more cuts. That's what it took to get rid of the cancer. Each one meant another hour of waiting for the lab results to come back, sitting in that sterile waiting room with nothing to do but think about the next cut. It was a long, exhausting day. The waiting room was cold and too bright, filled with that low-frequency hum that seems to exist in all medical offices. The TV was playing some show I didn't care about, and no one made eye contact. Everyone looked either numb or afraid. I guess I looked numb too. The weird thing is, I didn't feel much. Not fear, not sadness, just this low-grade resignation. Like, of course it wasn't gone the first time. Of course they had to cut more. Of course it still hurts. I sat there with my arm wrapped up like nothing had happened, scrolling my phone, responding to a few texts, pretending everything was fine. I even cracked a couple of jokes, kept it light, because that's what I do. But the truth is, I went through most of it alone. No one came with me. I didn't ask anyone to. I didn't want to be a burden, didn't want to have to explain what it meant or how it felt or why it scared me more than I was letting on. So I just handled it. Like always. And that's what sticks with me the most now, not the pain or the stitches, but how quickly I slid into survival mode, how automatic it's become to stuff it all down, to keep moving, to minimize, to joke through it, to not feel anything too deeply, just in case it all comes rushing up and swallows me. I've built an entire life around pretending I'm okay when I'm not, around showing up alone, dealing with it alone, and walking out with a bandage and a half-hearted "I'm fine." But I wasn't fine, I'm still not. It's not just the cancer, it's the silence I keep stuffing everything into. The quiet rooms, the white noise, the weight of always holding it together just long enough to fall apart in private. That's what today reminded me of, not just that my body's vulnerable, but that my coping mechanisms are too. And yet here I am, still here, still quiet, still pretending.